This evening we're going to be looking at the acid-alkaline balance. Now if you've ever had a swimming pool, you test the water every morning because if the water goes to acid, the pipes corrode. And if the water goes to alkaline, algae grows on the pipes. And the hydroponic gardener, he's constantly testing the water that the roots of the plants are sitting in. Because if the water goes to acid, the little roots burn, and if the water goes to alkaline, he doesn't get the speed of uptake of minerals out of the water and into the plant. So just as it's important in the swimming pool, and just as it's important in gardening, it's also important in the body. So what I'm going to begin with is I'm going to show you the acid-alkaline scale. It's called the pH scale. pH means potential hydrogen. So what's hydrogen got to do with it? When you dissolve acid in solution, it gives off hydrogen ions. And when you dissolve alkaline into solution, it gives off hydroxy ions. So in the middle we've got neutral, and neutral is neither acid nor alkaline, and its reading is 0. And up this end we've got 14, delete all that. Up here is 0. Up 7 is neutral and 14 is alkaline. Blood has a reading on the pH scale, and blood's reading is between 7.34 and 7.5. And 7.4. There's not much variation there, is there? You see, if blood pH goes up to 8, that person can go into a coma and die of alkalosis. And if blood pH drops down to 7.22, that person can go into a coma and die of acidosis. So there cannot be much variation there. And we don't have to worry about the pH of our blood because there are 2 organs that are constantly monitoring and balancing it to keep it in that range. One is your lungs. I was just talking with some of our students here about how they tried interval training this morning. And when you get to that 30 seconds, your lungs are moving. And you don't choose to breathe like that. What happens is you're running so fast, your muscles, which are made up of cells, so those little cells are calling out for more oxygen, but something else is happening. As you burn that oxygen and as you burn that glucose in the cell, it gives off carbon dioxide and some lactic acid, which is causing the pH of the blood to begin to go a little acid. And so the brain says, lungs, breathe deeply. Oxygen alkalizes, and as you breathe out, you're breathing out the carbon dioxide. So in that way, the lungs are helping. There's another organ, and that is the kidneys. Now the kidneys do it in quite a fascinating way. To show you how the kidneys are balancing the pH of your blood, we're going to go to the smallest component of the kidneys, which is the little filtering unit. So the blood comes in, it goes through those little filtering units, and then the filtrate comes out and weaves around these tubules. And here's the bladder where it is urinated out. So the blood comes in, weaves around the little filtering units, the filters, and then it weaves around the tubules. Now we each have approximately 1 million of those in one kidney, and we've got 2 kidneys, so that's about 2 million. So looking at the kidney, all those little filtering units are all on the edge, and then these tubules basically weave down like this into the ureter. There's the ureter from the other kidney into the bladder, and the urethra is where we urinate it out. Now in a 24-hour period, these little filtering units filter 1,800 litres of blood. Now we don't have that much blood. Every 2 minutes, 1.2 litres is being filtered, so there's a constant recycling. or recirculating, I should say. Out of that 1800 litres of blood, 180 litres of filtrate is filtered out. But we don't urinate out 180 litres, do we? Otherwise you'd be leaving this room every 5 minutes. We filter out approximately 1.5 litres in a day. So where's the other approximately 160? There's a reabsorption here. And you can see by the illustration I gave you here, this reabsorption, the little tubule areas, they take up quite a large part of the kidney. So let me show you how it happens. Let's say the blood is getting a little too acid. It is here that extra acid is dropped into the tubules to be urinated out. But let's say the pH of the blood is getting too alkaline. Well, it is here that extra acid is pulled out of the tubules back into the blood. So every 2 minutes, 1.2 litres is being filtered, constantly being monitored and as well balanced. So we don't have to worry about the pH of our blood because our lungs and their kidneys are doing a very good job. By the way, it is in this reabsorption area here where sodium and water levels are monitored and balanced. It is here also where blood pressure is balanced. That's why someone who has kidney problems, often on dialysis, they will also have blood pressure problems. So look after your kidneys. They not only filter your blood, they play a major role in what's called homeostasis, which is balancing the body.
So,
yeah?
So what happens if you're seeing blood in your urine?
That could be a few things. If you're seeing blood in your urine. Blood in your urine could be a little bit of damage in the tubules. And the only way you'll know what to do is try a few things and see what stops the blood in the urine. Cayenne pepper can stop it. And then you've got to make an assessment. Are you drinking enough water? Are your kidneys warm enough? Are you taking foods that are irritating to the kidneys? And today we're going to look at the acid-alkaline balance in relation to the food that we eat. And when you see that, you'll get a bit of an idea of what does irritate the kidneys. Now, the pH of the blood cannot change, as you see, but the pH at the cell can change. The cellular level of the pH cellular level should be approximately 6.5. That's very slightly acid, and there is a reason for that. The most acidic substance is sulfuric acid, and sulfuric acid travels at the speed of light. The most alkaline mineral is calcium, and on the scale of speed, calcium doesn't even move. So can you see that the hydroponic gardener, he also aims for about this 6.5. In fact, in the soil, the gardener aims for a 6.4. Very slightly acid, so the gardener gets the speed of uptake of minerals out of the plant, out of the water and into the plant, or out of the soil and into the plant. So with our cells down at the cellular level, we are going to be able to access more minerals when we have a pH cellular around that. How would you know? Well, you can get a bit of litmus paper and test your saliva and your urine, but don't test it early in the morning, it'll be acid because you've just gone through a detox overnight. The most accurate time would be probably about 2 hours after breakfast. Interesting to note that Coca-Cola has a very acid effect on the body. That's about 2.6. It's a killer. And this will shock you to know this, but some people drink it. It's true. Many are sick through ignorance. Now, I have drawn up the top here what's called the 8 laws of health. Basically, they're laws of common sense of what the body needs. And a breaking of those laws creates an acid environment, a keeping of those laws alkaline. So pure air is alkalizing to the body. If a person's breathing in mouldy air, bad air, chemical air, can create an acid environment. Too much sun, no sun, both create an acid environment. Just the right amount alkalizes. Temperance. Now basically what temperance means is not taking anything into the body that will harm it and taking in moderation the good things. So what are the things that harm the body? Alcohol, cigarettes, caffeines, refined sugars, drugs, chemicals, moles. They all create an acid environment. Rest. Too much sleep, not enough sleep creates an acid environment. Exercise. Too much exercise, not enough exercise. Many Americans and Australians don't exercise enough. Both create an acid environment. Just the right amount alkalizes. In a minute I'm going to show you the foods that create an acid environment and the foods that create an alkaline environment. Water. Water alkalizes. I've yet to meet the person that drinks too much water. Most people don't drink enough. Dr. Christopher, he said, here's a sign to see if you're drinking too much water. Put your head on the side and if the water falls out your ears, you're drinking too much. In other words, it's almost impossible to drink too much water. There is the story of a lady who died from drinking too much water. She drank 35 litres, so that's 35 quarts without urinating. So, warning, don't drink 35 quarts without urinating. Got that? Common sense isn't very common today, is it? Yes?
What's your opinion on the ionized water?
Ionized water, we'll have a look at that in a minute. The 8th law is trust in divine power. When a person is stressed out, worried, anxious, it creates an acid condition. When a person has trust in divine power, there's a couple of verses that illustrate that. One verse is Isaiah 26 verse 3. It says, "Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, he whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee." That peace in the soul alkalizes. Now, some of my family and friends break every law every day. Lungs and kidneys are struggling and they're just managing to keep it, and then the person has a cup of coffee or a can of Coke. Blood pH starts to drop, 7.34, 7.33, 7.32. Alarm bells go off. The last resort buffer system is called on. The most alkaline mineral in the body, which is calcium, is pulled out of its biggest storage house, which is the bones. Comes into the blood, it's a crisis, in a form of calcium phosphate, which is a crystal form, immediately neutralizes that acidic environment in the blood. 7.33, 34, we're safe, but at a cost. We now have free calcium excess floating through our body. And so what the body does, it'll dump it in the kidneys, kidney stones, gallbladder, gallstones, in the joints, arthritis, gout, on the bones as bone spurs. You've heard of a bone spur? You ask the doctor what the bone spur is. He'll say it's a calcium deposit. What's your next question? Why has it dumped it on my bone and not in my bone? Now, unless the doctor has studied nutrition, he will possibly not be sure as to why that is so. But there is a way to get rid of a bone spur. It's castor oil compresses. Get a little pad of cloth, moisten it with castor oil, put it on, put some plastic over it, bandage it on every night. If the bone spur's been there 3 years, it might take 3 months. If the bone spur's been there 3 months, might take 3 weeks. If the bone spur's been there 3 weeks, might take 3 days. So it depends how long it's been there. But I've got some good news. It'll never break down your bone. Do you remember Psalm 104 verse 14, where the Bible says God gave herbs for the service of man? Medicine calls it synergism, working with the needs of the body. But what probably affects more than anything is the food we eat. So I'm going to make a list of alkaline forming foods, and I'm going to make a list of acid forming foods. What makes the difference? It's the mineral composition of the plant. So alkaline foods are are high in the alkaline minerals, which is sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium and iron. So these are the 5 most alkaline minerals. Now the acid forming minerals are sulfur and phosphorus and chlorine. And these foods here are high in these minerals. So the most alkaline food that you can eat is the lemon. But isn't lemon acid? Yes, and it's acid in the only place in the body that should be acid. Any guesses? Stomach. If someone says, I've got a very acid stomach, I say, fantastic. It should be, because that's the only way your protein is going to get broken down. But then I say, how do you know it's acid? Well, it keeps coming up. But as I showed you in the lecture on the gut, the problem's not the acid, the problem is the little valve at the top. Now that little valve, to close it, you take magnesium because it's just a muscle. And that will relax that little muscle and close it. Most people have reflux or heartburn because they eat a large meal at night. So when they're lying down, that large meal is pushing against that little sphincter and stressed out. Muscles tighten and so that little sphincter opens. The lemon is a fantastic digestive aid. In fact, we have some magnificent dressings that we serve with our salads, and all of them have a basis of lemon. Sometimes they're lemon and olive oil and garlic, sometimes they're lemon and tahini and garlic and all, anyway, a whole lot of very nice dressings. They're digestive aids. But when the lemon is broken down in the gut, when it breaks down to glucose and fructose, you see, glucose and fructose are the 2 singular structures that are broken down from food. Then they go to the liver, and then the liver sends it to the cell to be burnt. But in the gut, the minerals are separated from the glucose, and they come straight away in, and what they do is they create an alkaline environment in the cell. Another very alkaline forming food is dark green leafy vegetables. Dark green leafy vegetables are green because of the chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is really plant blood. Now I'm going to show you something very interesting about chlorophyll. It's very similar in molecular structure to human blood. So for purposes of illustration, I'll do it like this. This is human blood. This is chlorophyll, or plant blood. Looks very similar, doesn't it? The difference is in human blood, this middle molecule is iron. But in plants, the middle molecule is magnesium. That's the only difference. So you can just about give yourself a blood transfusion by taking high amounts of chlorophyll. That explains why green barley is popular, wheatgrass is popular, spirulina is popular, chlorophyll, green smoothies. A lot of people take these greens. And remember, chlorophyll is the most potent blood and tissue cleanser in the body. At Misty Mountain Health Retreat and at Eden Valley, where we also run our programs, on the first day of juicing, we give the guests green barley 3 times a day, because they're going through a detox and it can mop up a lot of the poisons coming out of the body. So we should eat dark green leafy vegetables every single day. Very alkalizing. Vegetables are alkalizing, but there is a question mark with the vegetables, because there is one group of vegetables that for some people it has an acid effect and for some people it has an alkaline effect. It's the nightshade group of vegetables. So that's the tomato, and you call them a bell pepper. In Australia we call it capsicum, but I've been in America nearly 6 weeks, so I'm almost into the habit of writing bell pepper. Eggplant. Now, these foods are all from the nightshade group of vegetables, and the last one is potato, and I'm not referring to the sweet potato, I'm referring to the white potato or English or Irish potato. Sweet potato is not a potato, it is a yam. For some people, these have an acid effect, and for some people, they have an alkaline effect. How do you know? Well, there is a book you can buy called The Chilvers Diet, and it's by Dr. Norman Chilvers, and the whole book is on the nightshade family of vegetables, and he has got hundreds of testimonies in that book of people who conquered arthritis by going off the nightshades. And I'll tell you a story, an illustration. We had a couple come to our program, and they were in their early 70s, and they said to me, do you know, when we were 67, we booked ourselves into a retirement village, thinking we are retired now. They were both a little bit overweight, both had some arthritic pains, especially the lady, so they basically were settling down into old age. And their daughter gave them a set of my DVDs. They watched them and they thought to themselves, this sounds good. We're retired now, we can do what we want. And they do what I find many retirees do. They spend time exercising in the morning. They might even make themselves a vegetable juice, and then they have breakfast about 9 or 10. And then they have their main meal about 3 in the afternoon, then they don't eat again. So they began to exercise. The lady particularly stopped the nightshades because of her arthritis. 6 months later, she's totally pain-free. Her swollen joints are going down to normal. They've both lost 15 kilos. What would that be? Over 30 pounds in weight. Feeling good. Booked out of the retirement village. No need for that anymore. Bought a big van and decided to travel around Australia. Stopped halfway up the east coast, drove into a health retreat called Misty Mountain, and spent a week with us doing the health program. You couldn't stop the smile on that lady's face. She said, I'm in my early 70s now and I feel better than I felt when I was 50. The body can heal itself. You just give it the right conditions. One lady said, but I love this food. I said, how much do you love your arthritis? And it's not forever. So when this lady came to us, she said, I haven't eaten that for a couple of years. My arthritis is gone, I have no more pain. My swelling, the swelling had gone down, but you know, sometimes they get those hard, knobbly joints. They were going down to normal. Isn't that incredible? She said, do you think I could start eating that again? I said, maybe so. Who will tell her? Her body. That's right, her body. One lady said once she'd conquered her arthritis, she said, I can have a little organic tomato. I can have the red bell pepper but not the green. And one lady said, well, I can have the green and not the red. And another lady said, well, I can have the raw and not the cooked. And another lady said, well, I can have the cooked and not the raw. I love these stories. They're all stories of people doing what? Listening to the body. That's why I say, you're the doctor. I can advise, but the fine-tuning is yours. And your body will quickly tell you if it's not right. Am I right? Yes. Yes. She said, I have a little eggplant most days, potato, a little. Can you see you play with it? Your body can tell you what nobody can tell you. Your body can tell you what 10 professors can't tell you. Yeah?
Do you think that if you ate something that was acidifying, that if you drank like a green drink, you think it would?
Yeah, if you had something that was acidifying and then you had a green drink, that certainly could help. But remember, these are alkaline forming in the body. When the minerals are split from the food and into the cell, they bring about an alkaline environment in the tissues. When you cook tomato with olive oil, because I think they go the nicest together, something's released that is not available in the raw tomato, and that's lycopene. Did you know that raw foods will deliver what cooked won't? And did you know that cooked food will deliver what raw won't? So I myself, I aim for 50 raw, 50 cooked. If someone's 400 pound, they can handle all raw for several months. But if I have all raw, oh, my husband complains that I'm getting too thin. Can you see, you got to play with this. You got to play with this. So when you cook tomato, and I think olive oil goes the nicest, lycopene's released. Lycopene is a potent antioxidant, and it can reduce the inflammation of the prostate gland. So every man over the age of 40 should have a cooked tomato and olive oil dish maybe 3 times a week. That's easy. Yes?
What about purple potatoes and potatoes with red skin?
Well, all your white potatoes are much of a muchness. So there might be a slight variations, but they are a totally different vegetable compared to the yam. It's like for diabetics, the potato is high in the glycemic index, but the sweet potato is not. So what will it be for you? I cannot tell you, but your body can tell you. If you enjoy that food, you don't have arthritis, and it doesn't repeat on you all afternoon, I would endeavour to say you get a tick. But at our health retreat, we don't serve it because we do find maybe 15-20% of our guests can't handle it, so we don't serve it. But we say to our guests, if it sits well and you like it and you've got no arthritis, of course you can eat it. Now, if you have arthritis and you can't handle it at the moment, you may be able to handle it in a year or 2. So you keep testing. Fruit has a question mark, and the reason fruit has a question mark is that if someone has a yeast presence in their body, how would they know they had a yeast presence? Well, some of the most common symptoms are sinus problems, rashes, eczemas, psoriasis, but the tongue should be pink from the tip to the back. If someone has a yeast presence and they're eating a high fruit diet, the sugar in the fruit will feed the yeast. It's not fussy. It'll take any form of sweetener. And as it feeds on the sugar in the fruit, it gives off acetic acid. It gives off lactic acid. It gives off uric acid. And it gives off alcohol. So you can see by this that yeast feathers its nest. What do I mean by that? Well, yeast thrives in a cellular pH of 5.5. This is where fungus or yeast thrives. This is also where cancer thrives. And there's a lot of research today linking cancer and fungus together. You just Google it, put cancer fungus in together, and you'll get a whole lot of information. So can you see what fruit does? If you've got a yeast presence, it can feather its nest. So if someone has a yeast problem, I'll give you a story. I had a lady ring me and she said, I got a rash. It's just slowly spreading down my whole body. She said, I went to the doctor, took cortisone, stops it, but a week later it comes back worse. I went to a naturopath and they put me on molasses. What's molasses going to do to yeast? Do you know, some people say to me, I tried the natural way and it didn't work. There are many natural ways. So she rang me up and I said to her, stop the molasses. In fact, at the moment, stop all fruit, eat lots of vegetables, have some legumes, nuts and seeds, go to the health food shop, get some olive leaf extract, grapefruit seed extract. 2 weeks later, her husband rang. He said, wow. She said it stopped it in its tracks. And back up it went. Interesting. Now that's a strict diet. Once the rash goes, she doesn't have to stay on that diet. You see, it's just for a period of time. It's not forever. That's why when someone is sick, you got to think of them like, you got to put their body like in the nursery. You handle it a certain way. And as they heal, then you can relax off a bit. If you relax off too soon, what will the body say? Not yet, not yet. Okay, okay. That's why you're the doctor. A lady came to me and she said, I've got rheumatoid arthritis. She said, I've been on very heavy medication. She said, I've been on steroids, I've been on chemotherapy type drugs like methotrexate, very nasty drug, anti-inflammatory. She said, I've got myself off all my medication and I go to see the specialist and I don't tell him. Otherwise he won't see me. She said, I just sit there and go. I take the next script, go home and throw it in the bin. She said, every now and then, if I'm not drinking enough water, if I'm maybe not eating right, it all comes up again. She said, I'll go back on the drug for a little bit. She said, after being to your health retreat, I now know, instead of going back on the drug, I just take high-dose turmeric, fantastic anti-inflammatory, go back on a very strict no nightshade diet, alkaline diet, and grate up the ginger, put it in a little package and wrap it onto my sore joints. So easy. She said, I don't think I'll even have to go and see that guy anymore. I really appreciate when I hear a story of people who've conquered it, yeah? And remember, there is a great physician. His name is God. He made our bodies, and I believe He prompts us and leads us in the way that we shall go. One of my favourite verses is Psalm 32, verse 8, where God says, I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way that thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. Love that verse. You can see why. In fact, I think He brought you here today. In fact, I think He brought me here today. Millet. Millet is the alkaline grain. What's millet? Birdseed. Budgies eat it. Do you have budgies? I guess, sorry, budgerigars, it's an Australian bird, and we feed them millet. And they spit out the husk and they eat the kernel. You can buy hulled millet. And the hulled millet cooks down to a very nice porridge. So that's why I say to people that, you know, like oats for breakfast, I say alternate. Have millet one day, oats another way. It's an alkaline grain. Quinoa is also an alkaline grain. Buckwheat is an alkaline grain. Amaranth is an alkaline grain. Spelt is an alkaline grain, and kamut. Now let me tell you the wheat story at this point. The wheat that God made is called Enkhorn, and it has a very fragile protein or gluten structure. Now it is not sure when, maybe a couple of thousand years ago, Enkhorn did a wild hybrid with a field grass and produced the Emma strain of wheat. Now the Emma strain of wheat is not quite as fragile. This is the protein or the gluten structure, but still fairly fragile. Fragile is important. Fragile means that the grinding and the cooking and the chewing and the digestive enzymes easily break it down so it can be absorbed into our blood. Now in the 1950s, a group of scientists put the Emma wheat through some intensive crossbreeding, and they produced a wheat that only grows this high, has a thick stem and a very high yield. We had one farmer, he said, we get 10 times more grain with that wheat than with the original wheat. Original wheat grows that high, but the new wheat grows that high. You have a look when you're driving past wheat today, it'll be this height. That's the hybridized wheat. Now what was never addressed was the effect on the human body of this hybridized wheat. Last night I showed you how it changed the starch structure. Now it has made a very complex gluten structure. So the hybridized wheat, in the hybridization process, it produced a very complex protein or gluten structure. And almost only a cast iron gut can break that one down. Now, if that wheat flour is made into a sourdough bread, the culturing process in the sourdough bread breaks it down so that it's less complex. Now, spelt and kamut are wild hybrids of the emmer wheat, so they still have that fairly fragile structure. And if you make spelt flour into a sourdough bread, it can bring that structure back to the original Enkhorn structure. Isn't that interesting? Traditionally, all bread was made with the sourdough method. It's a cultured method. Yes?
What's the best way? Because I've used the millet, but it's so tough.
You've used the what?
The millet?
Millet. Did you buy hulled millet? Hulled. Might be my accent. The hull's taken off it. Because you can cook unhulled millet for 2 weeks and it'll still be tough. Yeah. But it's just very, very tough. But we just buy the hulled millet and it cooks up to a very nice porridge. Ezekiel bread, the wheat has, you know, even organic bread today, wheat today, is still the hybridized one. But with the Ezekiel bread, they have sprouted it. Now, a lady that I gave in a lecture last week in Milwaukee, she said that what she does, because any wheat you buy now is the hybridized wheat, she sprouts it, blends it with a little water, pours it onto trays and dehydrates it to make crackers. Now that sprouting process would break down the gluten. So that would be all right. Because it can be very sad if someone's bought a big bag of wheat last week. So now, what you're best to buy is either the spelt or the kamut. Now notice the time frame. 1969, Dr. Norman Bulag got a Nobel Prize for his hybridized wheat. They did it to save the starvation crisis, and it certainly made a difference. And no one complains about that. 1970s, this wheat went worldwide. Farmers loved it. Only grows this high. Sometimes they can get 2 crops in a harvest. More grain per acre means more money, which of course is important for the farmer. 1990s, every cereal, every bread, every cake, cookie, donut, pretzel, pasta, pie, pizza is made out of the hybridized wheat. I've got a friend who's a physician. She said, 20 years ago you never heard of gluten intolerance. We know it's big now because just going to the supermarket there are whole sections that are gluten-free. Why is that? It's because of this hybridized wheat, but it's because of something else. Babies are being fed food too young. You see, the first teeth we get is 4 here, 4 there. They're called milk teeth. That's all babies should have, milk. But it's taste time. When I was at my son's place, my little granddaughter, Sophia, 9 months old, crawls up to me. I'm eating my breakfast, big bowl of cut up fruit and nuts and seeds. And what does she want to do? Be with me. My daughter-in-law and son used to hide the food because she only has 3 teeth. I sit her on my knee, I get a grape, and I just nibble the skin off the top and I put it into her hand. And of course, in her hand it's like that. And for 20 minutes, she happily sat there sucking on that little bit of grape while I ate my breakfast. You see, when they've only got a few teeth, that's taste time. And at lunchtime, she did the same thing. I had a big plate of broccoli and greens. I gave her a tiny little head of broccoli, lightly steamed this big, and she sat there for 20 minutes nibbling on that. That's what you do. They're social creatures. They just want to do what you're doing. But if they've only got 3 teeth, they... See, the next teeth that come through are the molars. They come through at the back here. They're the grinders. What do we grind? Grain. And it's not until those molars are through that ptyalin is released. And ptyalin is the enzyme that breaks down starch. So babies should have no starch until their molars are through. When do the molars come through? Between 14 and 20 months of age. What are mothers told to give their babies between 4 and 6 months of age? Cereal. What's cereal? Pure starch. Malabsorption syndrome is set up in the gut of those babies. So that's another reason why we're seeing so much gluten intolerance, because of this malabsorption syndrome in the gut. There is another reason, and that is Americans and Australians overdo the wheat. And as I showed you the other night, isn't this common foods? How many people do you know have cereal and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, pasta for tea, donuts or biscuits, well, cookies, sorry, we call them biscuits, mid-morning, mid-afternoon? That's almost 100% wheat. I've met some sick vegetarians. They said, we were healthier when we were eating meat. What happened? Instead of eating meat, they now eat pasta, rice, bread, just overload of the wheat. You see that? So it's overdoing this hybridized wheat, being fed food too young as babies. Do you know it's only a recent phenomenon? 100 years ago, they didn't give babies food. I was talking to a lady in Fiji. She's 19, single mother. Beautiful little 5-month-old baby. Roly-poly, smiley, fat, healthy. She came to me one day because we were with her a few days. She said, my baby cried all night. So my detective hat goes on. Why? Did you give the baby, do something different? Oh, my mother and my auntie and my grandmother and the baby health centre said my baby must be given cereal. Now here's this fat, healthy, roly-poly baby. What does a fat, healthy, roly-poly baby tell you? They're getting the right stuff. Okay. But the book says, who wrote the book? Oh, well, the people that make the Farex, the people that make the rice cereal, the vested interest. I said, does your baby have any teeth? She said, no. I said, well, the baby hasn't teeth, the baby shouldn't eat. She said, that makes sense. Next day I saw her, how's your baby? Oh, happy. I saw her a week later. I said, what did your mother and your grandmother and your auntie and the baby health centre say? She said, they were not happy with me. I said, well, what did you say to them? She said, the baby has no teeth. And they were silent. Common sense isn't very common, is it? And when you get a paediatrician writing in the newspaper, your baby will be smarter if you feed it food younger. Do you know, anyone can say anything. That's why we've got to go back to common sense. I had a lady ring me, her baby's 18 months old. She said, my baby just is not interested in food. I said, that's perfectly fine. How many teeth does he have? 4? I said, he doesn't need it. Until the teeth are full through, isn't that common sense? The baby's main food should be milk. Do you know in biblical times they would breastfeed babies till they were 5? We don't have to breastfeed them till they're 5. My last baby I breastfed till he was 3. That was a bit of a stretch, last baby. He's 28 now. There's another reason. In Australia and America, most wheat is grown in superphosphate. Superphosphate in the soil kills off the microbes, blocks the minerals being able to get into the plant, and so the plant is deficient in the basic coenzymes required to digest it. There's more. When the gut hasn't got the proper lining, all those nice bacteria, it can't break it down properly. So no wonder we are seeing so much gluten intolerance. What are the most common signs of a gluten intolerance? I'll give you the most common because there are many. The 2 most common are brain fog and bloating. And how many people do we know have that? And so many people just live with it because they think it's normal. lima beans and lentils and soybeans. These are the most alkaline legumes. Soy is only a problem if it's been genetically modified and grown with herbicides, insecticides. Nuts. Almonds are called the king of all nuts, and they deserve the title because they're the most alkaline nut, and they're the highest nut in protein, highest in calcium, highest in iron. Excellent nut. That's a nut I eat every day. And Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts are phenomenally high in selenium. They've got about 10 times the selenium of any other plant. And your thyroid gland requires selenium to convert iodine into thyroxine. So, and let me tell you something else about selenium. Mercury has an affinity for selenium. So if someone's got mercury fillings in their mouth, that can be gobbling up all their selenium. So a person can have thyroid problems because they got mercury fillings in their mouth. Whew. 5 Brazil nuts a day will give you all the selenium that you need for the day. Yes?
Do you soak your nuts?
Do I soak my nuts? No. If you chew your nuts well, you digest them well. For someone with gut problems, soaking them may help. All your seeds. Sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, chia seeds. The most acid-forming substance, sorry, I cannot bring myself to call it a food, is sugar. And I'm referring to the pure crystallized acid that's been extracted from the sugarcane plant. It's one of the most dangerous substances ever to be introduced to the human frame. It is pure acid. The hybridized wheat, the hybridization of the wheat created more of these acid-forming minerals. Meat, when meat breaks down in the human body, especially at the cellular level, it gives off a lot of sulfur. Let me show you. I'll give you an illustration of meat and dairy here. Here is a glass of cow's milk. It is high in protein and it is also high in calcium. But all animal protein is very dirty burning fuel. Only 58% is burnt as fuel. So that leaves a 42% waste, and that is a sulfur waste. So the body now uses the most alkaline mineral to negate it, which is the calcium. You know how much calcium is left for us after drinking a glass of milk? None. And if a person has a glass of milk and a steak, there's not enough calcium in the milk to negate the sulfur residue from the steak, and so now the calcium is taken out of the bones. The countries in this world with the highest consumption of meat and dairy products have the highest incidence of osteoporosis. So that meat gives off a very sulfur waste, a high sulfur waste. Aged cheese. What's the blue in the blue vein cheese? It is mold, and it is very acid. Fungus, very acid. Now let me do a pH of 7 here. This is your feta, ricotta. Cheeses like that, they're fresh, so they don't have the mold factor, so they're more at a pH of 7. Caffeine is acid forming. Alcohol is not a food, but it creates an acid environment. Tobacco is not a food, but it creates an acid environment. All your other grains, other than the list on the alkaline side, all your other legumes, other than lima, lentil and soy, and all your other nuts, other than the Brazil and the almond, have an acid effect. Now to maintain this 6.5 environment at the cellular level, we need to be taking 20 to 30% acid forming foods from this section here. and 70 to 80% alkaline forming foods. Now that ratio will maintain the 6.5 environment. Let's go over to our carbohydrate list that we looked at last night. How many are from the acid side? Cereal, bread, cakes, pretzel, pasta, pizza, pie, rice, sugar. And you deep fry the potatoes in 2-week-old oil, they can come over too. You call it French fries. We call it chips in Australia. What would most Americans be eating? 90 acid, 10, yeah? And what's the number one killer in America? Heart disease and cancer, neck to neck, yeah? Yes. Same as in Australia, neck to neck. Sometimes one goes ahead a little bit, then another time the other goes ahead a little bit. And as I looked at last night, the combination of the sugar in the milk, the high sugar, alcohol, the caffeine, tobacco, damaging the arterial walls, causing that cholesterol to start building up to try and protect it. Many are sick through ignorance. Many are unaware that the food is actually killing them. One of the easiest ways to alkalize your food program is to eat more vegetables, more dark green leafies. Start pursuing the other grains. We need a little acid. One lady said, "Oh no, rice is over here and I love rice." We need a little acid. A little rice is fine. But instead of having a whole plate of rice, have a little bit of rice and a whole lot of lentils and a big salad. See, by doing that, you actually change the ratio a little bit. One lady said, "Oh, I love chickpeas," and they're on the acid side. I said, "I love chickpeas too," or garbanzos, sorry. You call them garbanzos. I love garbanzos too. And I had some for lunch yesterday. We need a little acid. It's all about the ratio. Now, just outside this hotel here, do you see when you come in, there are those big bushes with the big white flowers? They're hydrangeas. Now, sometimes you'll see hydrangeas and they're pink. Sometimes they're a dark, hot magenta pink. Sometimes they're purple. Sometimes they're blue. It's not different types of hydrangea. The gardener plays with the pH of the soil, because different pHs bring out different colours in the flowers. I don't know quite what they've done to get the white.
With the broccoli?
Pardon?
Some broccolis are different colors.
No, they're different types of plants. It's only with the hydrangea. Now, just as the gardener plays with the pH of the soil to get different coloured flowers, you can play with the pH of your cell to get different health, sickness effects in your body. As I said, one of the easiest ways is to go more to this section there. And yes, have a little bit from this section here. That's the easiest way to do it.
Is there a way to test what your alkalinity is?
Is there a way to test what your alkalinity is? You can get litmus paper. I think you can just buy it from the chemist and you can put it in your saliva or your urine. But again, do it 2 hours after breakfast is probably the best time. And if at first it's a little acid, don't be concerned, because you've just gone over to this diet, your body will start detoxing a bit. I actually never test mine. But what I do is I aim for a 20 to 30, 70, 80 diet. And I know that if I do that, drink my water, go to bed early, remember those 8 laws of health are also affecting it, I know that it will be the ratio that I want it to be. I never say never. I personally don't do supplements, but organic fruits and vegetables have a far higher mineral content because they use the microbes in the soil. It's the microbes in the soil that break down the heavy metals and minerals and put them into the plant. In fact, the food that's the highest minerals is stinging nettle. You don't have to chew on it. You can cook it. And remember, when you cook food, you don't lose your minerals. The only time you lose your minerals is if you throw the water away that you cook them in, because the minerals go into the water. And at Misty Mountain Health Retreat, at the end of the day, our guests have a steam bath where they sit and have a big sweat. And then when they finish the steam bath, they come into our health centre and we have a big pot of broth. Now we cook a whole lot of vegetables in the broth pot and put stinging nettle in too, and then we strain it and they drink that. And they're replacing the minerals they just lost in the big sweat. And we also put the Celtic salt in there that has 82 minerals. Yes?
What is that word you just said?
Stinging nettle?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weed. You can't buy it, but you'll know that if you touch it, it'll sting. But its roots go very deep, so it accesses minerals from deep in the soil. Just when we needed it, water.
Somebody mentioned about ionized water.
Ionised water, yes. Someone mentioned alkaline water. A lady rang me up. She said, Barbara, we can't really eat the way you eat. We like our sugar. We like our, a bit of junk. But she said, we have the alkaline water. It's really not going to do a lot. And alkaline water machines are expensive. What has more effect on your body is if you keep those laws of health and have a more alkaline diet. And if you have some water and put a squeeze of lemon in it, it will alkalize it. Now what I'm going to be talking on now is the mind. So can everyone hear me? I'm just wondering, the green light is on. Yep. Now if you look at the brain, from side on it looks like that, and if you look at the brain from top down it looks like this. If you want to know what your brain looks like, look at a walnut. Now there are two lobes in the front, and medicine calls it the frontal lobe, and it's in the frontal lobe of the brain where our intellect is. It's in the frontal lobe where our reasoning powers reside, where judgment takes place, and where our will is. And the will is the governing power in the nature of man. So it's a pretty important part of the brain, isn't it? And in the human brain, it takes up about the front third of the brain. And this frontal lobe is fully developed at the age of 30. And you will find in many cultures, young men weren't given positions of responsibility until the age of 30. We go to the oldest history book we've had, which is the Bible, and you'll see Jesus didn't begin his ministry until the age of 30. It is in the frontal lobe part of the brain where our foresight is, where self-control is, where our organisation skills are. And the mind and the nerves gain tone and strength through the exercise of the will. So you can actually strengthen that part of your brain through the exercise of the will. And so tomorrow, when you're tempted with a cup of coffee or a candy, and you say, no thank you, do you know what that does? You've just strengthened your frontal lobe. Remember, mind and nerves gain tone and strength through the exercise of the will. The will is not a muscle, but it is just like a muscle, in that the more you use it, the stronger it gets. Now, the will shouldn't be beaten to pieces, and it shouldn't be let allowed to go wherever it wants. It's so important for parents to train their children. The Bible says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he was not depart from it. You see, habits can be our best friend or our worst enemies. And the brain cell looks like this. And this is what our brain is made up of, is about 1 trillion of these. And these cells do not touch each other, they communicate with each other via little chemical messengers. And here is the next nerve cell. And the messages can be travelling from cell to cell at 200 kilometres an hour. So the messages come in, they're encapsulated, then they're sent down the arm into the little boutons and into the next cell. That's how it all happens. And our brain is made up of 1 trillion of those. And when we develop habits, it's basically pathways that come in. And the more we go down the pathways, what's happening? The stronger it gets. Now let's say you've got a child. And the little child, and I see it happen because I'm on the plane a lot, wants the iPhone. And the child can't have the iPhone. What does child do? Scream, cry. I've seen a child on the floor near me screaming, and I've seen the parents with lollies, or candies you call it, trying to, and you know what I know? That isn't the first. And what happens at home, and I'll show you how it happens. Say, child, and why does child want iPhone? Do you know if child never had iPhone, child wouldn't even want it because they wouldn't even know what it does. But so often when parents are busy, they give the iPhone to the child, total silence. And they can do whatever they want. It's attractive, especially when you're in a hurry or especially when you're busy. And then when it's time to take the iPhone off the child, what happens? Then the tantrum. And the parent says, I'll just ignore it. And then the child, every time they can't have something, what happens? At first it's only one, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it gets to the point where the child is tantruming every time things don't go their way. They've got a strong pathway established. So we'll take this one away. This is called the tantrum pathway. Basically, the child has got into the habit of tantruming. So what do we do with that child? Well, there's a very effective way to actually cure them of a tantrum. Now, let's say they're tantruming on the floor here. Well, you don't want to do this treatment on the floor because it'll wreck the floor. So you pick the child up, you know, they're screaming and crying, and put them on the veranda. You get a bucket of cold water and whoosh, child will go, looks at you, you look at child says, that was cold. And mother says, yes, you were getting a little hot under the collar. I just wanted to cool you down. One lady said to me, that's child abuse. I said, that is not child abuse. I tell you what is child abuse, allowing the child to tantrum. Because when a child tantrums, it hurts their nerves, it hurts their muscles, it hurts their ligaments, their tendons, their digestion stops, their colon blocks up. Did everyone hear that? And it's just a hydrotherapy treatment. Wonderful tonic. And often the next time the child goes to do it, all you have to do is reach for the bucket. And if the child is tantruming and you put the bucket of cold water on and they get even angrier and start up again, you just say a 4-letter word, more. Some very stubborn ones will need another one. But can you see how the parent or the uncle or the aunt or the grandparent reacts? Calmly. Sorry, sweetheart, you were just getting a little bit hot. I'm just cooling you down. See why you don't do it on the carpet? Because you're going to have to muck up the carpet. And you know what the child will learn? They will learn that's not working. Now, a child's frontal lobe isn't very big, but I can assure you it can be trained. Now, what a lot of parents do, they don't decipher between the act and the child. And when you get angry at a child, do you know what the message is? I don't like you. And if you nip it in the bud, the parent doesn't get angry because it's been dealt with. And so you can actually cause your child to be more intelligent by having limits. There are guidelines and there are limits. Let's just say you say to the child, whether they be 5 or 10 or 15 or 20, you can go anywhere here but not into that square. What's the first thing they do? And they look straight at you. Why? Is what they said true? And if the parent says, or the aunt or the uncle or the grandparents say, I told you not to go in that square, you know what they think? That didn't hurt. I told you not to go in the square. Rah, rah, rah. What an interesting noise. Don't go in the square. Whack, whack, whack. That is the worst. The only time a child should never be struck in anger. That is the only time it will make them angry. And the Bible says, parents, don't stir up anger in your children. You know what stirs up anger in children? Injustice. Now, if the child is told that if they step over there, they'll get a whack, and they step over and they get a whack, they know they deserve it. Because they stepped over the line and they were told. And you know what the parent says? I'm so sorry you've chosen the whack. Whack. Now, as a friend of Michael's said to him one day, don't play smackies. You know what playing smackies is?
Right.
If it doesn't hurt, there's no use doing it. So, in some children, their frontal lobes develop quite quickly, quite strongly and quite well because there's limits in the home. And the next time the child comes near that square, they really want to go in that square, but they remember that last time it hurt. And I tell you what, if that square was full of stinging nettles, they would never go in there again. It's as simple as that. They want to go in there, last time it hurt, so they control themselves. I don't want that again. and they don't go there. It's actually very simple, and most parents don't start young enough. See, my son Peter, 10 months old, he's feeding. He's just got some teeth. He stops sucking because when they suck, they use their tongue and their top lip. And to bite, they have to pull that tongue in. And he bites, and I go, ow! Baby thinks, oh, what an interesting sound. I quickly sit him on the floor and leave the room immediately, very swiftly. What does he do? He hasn't even had half a feed yet. Wah! I let him cry for about a minute. Also, breathing deeply to the pain to stop. I come in and I smile at him. Do you know what the smile says? I love you. And I say to my son at 10 months old, will we try again? You'd be surprised what they know. Yes. They can tell by your tone. I do not pick him up until he stops crying. I say, stop, stop. I pick him up. If he starts crying again, I put him back down. Now, if he fell over and hit his head and he was crying, I would pick him up straight away. You see, there's a difference. He stops crying. I'm smiling. What does the smile say? I love you. What did me putting him down and walking away tell him? The behaviour is unacceptable. He starts to feed. I smile. He's my 5th child. So I'm drawn away to something else that another child is asking me. And I notice he stops sucking. And I know he cannot bite unless he stops sucking, pulls tongue in and bites. He stops sucking. I quickly put my head around and go, yes. And he never bit me again. You see, it's training them. They need your guidance as to what is acceptable and what is not. Now, none of my children tantrumed, and I think it's because at a young age there were guidelines. There were rules. And if they're started early enough, they quickly know by your look and your tone of voice what they can and what they cannot do. And one lady said to me, oh, you must spoil your grandchildren. And I didn't answer her because I knew she wouldn't like my answer. She asked me again. I said, no. What does spoil mean? Ruin something beautiful. Now, when Michael and I get home on the 1st of July, on the 3rd of July, we will have our 3 little grandsons with us for 1 week, and they love coming to Grandma and Pa's house for the holidays. And you know, there are strict rules in my home. We have never, ever had to smack or discipline these little boys because my son, he's very strict. And they know their guidelines and they're very happy boys. And one day I remember I said to little Sonny, Sonny, it's time to put your clothes on for the day, take your pyjamas up. I turned around and he still was just reading a book. I said, Sonny, and he still read the book. I said, Sonny, and he looked at me and I said, does Grandma need to get the naughty stick? He took his clothes off.
Right.
You see, I don't have to do a thing because he's had the naughty stick at home. And I'm so glad my son has done the work. Then I don't have to do it. And oh dear, us grandmas don't like smacking our little ones. And I'll tell you a funny story to illustrate. When I had all my children at home, a lady dropped her 2 little ones with me just for the morning while she went shopping. And little boy 7, little girls 5. And the little boy was running around helping me all day. Do you want me to dry the dishes? Please. And the little girl was just quiet and she just stood next to her brother all day long and did whatever he did. And then he said, do you want me to do something else? Well, you can go and get some kindling for the fire, you know, the little sticks. And then he'd come back and want to do something else. And after about a couple of hours, I said, your parents must be very happy to have such a good helper. He said, oh, look, it took a lot of smacks to get us this good. Not mortally wounded. So those parents obviously would not have smacked in anger. Can you see there's a big difference there? You see, the will needs to be gently guided and directed, not beaten to pieces, not allowed to go wherever it wants. And these children make excellent workers. You know, there are many tradesmen in Australia today who are not apprenticing young men or young women because they say they don't come to work on time, they don't do what they're told, if we put them near a computer, we've lost them for the day. Whose fault is that? It's the parents. That's right. There must be rules in the home because when they leave home, guess what? There's rules. A mother said to me recently, my husband's very, very hard on my children. I said, good. She said, but sometimes he's mean. I said, good. She looked at me and I said, you know, it's a tough world out there. It's a very tough world out there. And it is better that it be a little bit hard on the children in the home with loving parents who love them and prepare them for what's out there. She said, but I find it very hard. I said, I know you do. You got the mother heart. I said, that's when you go and put the clothes on the line. Do you do that in America? That's when you go and dig a garden. And I think men more know that it's tough out there, whereas the mother heart. And that's why what I said to this mother, I said, you must never go against your husband in front of the children. In fact, they can cope with that better than if you come in and say, hey, what are you doing? That upsets the child. Can you see that? And if you think the husband was even cruel, later that night you say, husband dear, can we talk? You know, and he will talk. But you know, the Bible says, men, love your wives. Because many men think that loving the wives is, they got a car, they got food on the table and a house. But no. Women need to be told that you love them. Women just love. And so you know what the Bible says to women? Women, reverence your husband. Respect your husband. That's what's very important to men. Michael and I are in the car one day. We're not long married. He said, I'm not sure where we are. And I said, let's ask someone.
No way.
He's the captain of the ship. And when I say that, I'm actually not trusting that he's in control. So if he ever says now, I'm not sure where we are. I just look out the window. Maybe I'm living. You know, it's so important because we are giving messages also to the children. So the frontal lobe is strengthened through the exercise of the will. And I might want to say, but Michael, this is ridiculous. You know, that man there, look, he lives here, he will not. No. Look out the window. Do you know what the proverb says? He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life. But he that openeth wide his mouth shall have destruction. And another proverb says, the fool utters all his mind, but the wise man keeps it in till afterwards. And so I very quickly rewired my brain when I realised that my husband appreciated me just letting him drive the car. Now, if I'm in a habit of telling him what to do and that's the pathway, I can actually change my pathway. Because you know, you never nag because it never does any good. And if I'm in the habit of saying, but Michael, this man will... Stop. Just stop. And then every time I stop, I might have a pathway that insists that we ask that man or... If I stop and don't do that anymore and don't go down that pathway anymore, which I don't, that pathway becomes very small and I've got a new pathway that I just look out the window at the rose gardens or I knit. And now the last thing in my mind comes in is to say, let's ask someone. That pathway's long gone. And you know what science shows? We can be rewiring our brain right up until the day we die. And same with the child. It's developed a strong habit of tantrums. You'll be surprised how quickly the bucket of water and they won't go down there anymore. And you know what the good news is? You can take them anywhere. And now they've got a pathway where they've learnt to control. We all get challenged, we all get frustrated. The back part of our brain is the feeling part. And that feeling part is a bad boss because the feelings go up and down like the wind, but the front part of the brain is a very good boss. Because every decision that this part of the brain makes is made according to intellect, reason and judgments, and that's what it should be. Do you know the problem is when someone is breathing in bad air, they're not having enough sunshine, they're living on the stimulants, the sugars, the caffeines, the drugs in many cases, the alcohols. Do you know that all compromises frontal lobe? And so things are said, feelings are manifest that should never be manifest. That's why the fool utters all his mind, but the wise man keeps it until afterwards. Do you know the Bible says in Colossians 4 verse 6, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how to answer every man. And remember, practice makes perfect, and practice makes permanent. There's the permanent pathway. There's an excellent book. The man's name is Keith Lehman. And he's written a few books now. One is called Have a New Kid by Friday, and it's just the laws of cause and effect. He's written another book, Have a New Teenager by Friday, Have a New Husband by Friday, Have a New Self by Friday. And I knew a lady, she read halfway through the book, Have a New Husband by Friday. She threw the book down and she said, stupid book, all it's talking about is me. Actually, that's what it's all about, isn't it? just the way that it is handled. But the rewiring of the brain is an amazing process. It means that if you're in a bad habit, if you stop doing that habit, whether it's waking up every morning to a cup of coffee, and you start waking up every morning to a big drink of water and interval training, how long does it take before the new pathway is stronger than the old pathway? 21 days. That's only 3 weeks. In the space of our lifespan, that's not very long, is it? It's not very long at all. Do you know with children, training children under the age of 3, that old pathway disappears. After the age of 3, it is still there, but you know it can be such a light little pathway that's never visited that it's hardly known. You probably have heard that once an alcoholic stops drinking, he's only one drink away from being, because that pathway can be revived very quickly. But there's no need to ever go down the pathway. God gave us a wonderful thing when he gave us the power of choice. And that's why keeping those 8 laws of health, going to bed early, exercising, having adequate water, not taking any of the stimulants, it keeps this frontal lobe sparky, so we have the ability to make those intelligent decisions. Let me give you another illustration of a lady who was having panic attacks. And it had got to the point where she was panicking even when she heard a loud noise. Now it started with a little thing, but it got stronger and stronger and stronger until just about anything caused her to panic. Now what's the options of that? Medication. She went to the doctor. He said, you get panic attacks. What did that do to the pathway? That just made it even stronger. He said, you'll be on medication for the rest of your life. She went home. Her mother said, what did the doctor say? He said I get panic attacks. Bit more. He said, I'll be medication for the rest of my life. Can you see that? Then she came to our health retreat. When she told me her story, I said, I think you're panicking about your panic attacks. She smiled. What did that say? She said, it's almost as if I cannot do anything else. You see, it's the pathway of least resistance, that one. And that's the pathway we go down, isn't it? The pathway of least resistance. And you know, it's a good thing to challenge your pathways of least resistance. I was running up steps with my daughter last week near a lake. We were doing our interval training, and she kept yelling out, do the left, do the left. She was yelling to herself because her right foot kept trying to be the first one up. And she was trying to put her left foot. You see, just challenge yourself with the way that you do things. That keeps the brain sparky. God designed this brain that we can be rewiring till the day we die and learning new things till the day we die. So this lady that came to me with the panic attack, I said, I understand, but I said, I believe you'll be able to conquer your panic attacks. What did I do when I said that? I made another pathway. I said, I think eventually you'll be off your medication. There's another pathway. Did she like that? Oh, yes. Now, the hardest time will be when the first challenge happens to her. Because where is her feelings going to want to go? The easy way. So I said to her, this is what to do when the feeling comes. Laugh. She said, I will not feel like laughing. I said, you're absolutely right. You won't feel like laughing. But remember, feelings are a bad boss. Don't listen to them. They're like a wild horse. They need the reins on them. Whoa up. Whoa. What are your reins? That's your frontal lobe. Your frontal lobe is your reins. Your feelings and your thoughts will thread through that. And at that point, your frontal lobe can say, no, we're not going to say that. Or the frontal lobe can say, yeah, I think that'll work. It's split-second stuff, isn't it? One lady said, I got 2 voices in my brain. I said, we all have. And the one you listen to is the one that will win the fight. It's like when we wake up in the morning, oh, it's so nice and warm in this bed. I'll just lie a little longer. That's feelings. What does the boss say? The good boss. You should get up, you got a busy day, and you know if you exercise, you see the dialogue? And you know, that's where habit can really help. I'm in a habit of getting up early. I'm in the habit of exercising I'm in the habit of having my water by me and my salt, and every time I wake, I'm in the habit of it. So your habits can be your best friends or your worst enemy. If you're in the habit of laying in, if you're in the habit of getting up, putting the kettle on, making your coffee, it's a challenge to change that habit. But it can be done. So I said to this lady, next time you get a panic attack, I said to her, laugh. I won't feel like laughing. Well, in Australia there are kookaburras. Have you heard the kookaburra? It goes, "Ooh, ooh, 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 ah, ah, ah." That's the kookaburra. So in Australia I say, just pretend to be a kookaburra. Or you can just go ho, 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 ho. Get a crystal of Celtic salt, glass of water, your brain's a hydroelectric system. Put the kettle on, get the chamomile tea bag, pour the chamomile tea bag. Body's screaming. Don't take any notice of it. Got that? Don't take any notice of it. It's screaming at me. Just ignore it. That's your feelings. Just ignore it. Feelings aren't bad, but they're a bad boss. And in this situation, they are. Go outside, take some deep breaths, do some star jumps if you can, push-ups, can't do push-ups, push-ups on the wall. Just do some stretches. Oxygen soothes the nerves. Sit down, have the chamomile tea. Usually by the end of that cup of tea, everything's settled down. Now, the first time that lady conquered her panic attack, how did she feel? Like a mighty conqueror. The next one's going to be difficult too, but it's going to get easier and easier and easier and easier, and it'll take approximately 21 days before her panic attack pathway is tiny and her conquering the panic attack pathway is her strong one. And eventually a stressful situation will arise and she won't even panic. Isn't that good news? I have seen so many people conquer their panic attacks by doing this. One girl said, "That's going to be really hard." I said, "That's right." That's right. That's right. And in life, the more effort we put in, the more we will get out of it. My daughter has a friend who's a violinist. She's a mother with little children. She wanted to join the orchestra in Tasmania. That's the little island at the bottom of Australia. It's a very fine orchestra. She was going for an audition. She practiced playing the violin 5 hours a day for 2 weeks before she went for the audition. She got the part. How much are you prepared to put into this? Huh? And isn't this even more important? This is our character, this is our life, this is our relationship. And you know, the people we are challenged with the most are usually the ones we're living with. And one of the things I love about my husband is he doesn't change. I've seen him talk to the mayor no different to the way he talks to his daughter or his grandkids. And there's not many people like that. And you know, in the local town, whenever they're going to have a meeting, and it's going to be a hot one, you know, the council against the Chamber of Commerce, they call Michael. They said, "We want you to chair it because you're the only one that won't get angry." Do you think he feels like getting angry? Do you think he's frustrated with some of these issues? They won't tar the roads, but they've got hundreds in offices. You know, 50 years ago, there were lots of people working on the roads and not many in offices. Yeah, it's frustrating. And they want to raise our taxes to do the roads. Anyway, that's a bit. So you can see that the townspeople were upset. So they get Michael to chair it because he doesn't get angry. And when the meeting had finished, the townspeople are there, the councillors are there and the mayor. Michael finishes it and goes straight over to the councillors, and the mayor smiles and shakes their hand. We are all challenged. But it is totally inappropriate to actually manifest it most of the time. But I'm upset, we'll go for a run. I'm frustrated, we'll have a cold shower. Dig a garden, there's no garden. We'll run around the block 3 times. But it's snowing, well, that'll really cool you off. It would be better that a mother ran outside in her nightie and ran round the block and her neighbours think she's crazy than she lose it with her children in the kitchen. what's important, and those children will remember. That's why the Bible says, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. And when I married Michael, I had 6 children, he had 2. It was nearly 19 years ago, and my son William was only 10. And I had seen him prone to anger a few times. You know, he is not now, and it's nothing that was said or done, but he now had a father who was not prone to anger. We teach more by what we do and how we treat people than, yeah. And you can rewire your brain. Yes, it's difficult, but it gets easier. It's like when I first started to play the recorder, Michael would run out the door. But I've actually got a bit of a tune-up now. And we should be learning new things right up until the day we die. Many brains deteriorate because they stop being used. I love the story of the 90-year-old man who learned to play the piano, the 92-year-old man who graduated from law school. We should never stop learning. Now, we've got 1 trillion brain cells, and every time we learn something new, we develop another dendrite, another dendrite, another dendrite. And science shows us that the most powerful learning tools are learning a new instrument. Can you play a musical instrument? It's time to learn. One man said to me after hearing this lecture, he said, I'm a violinist, I'm 73. I put my most difficult pieces away. He said, I'm going to go home this afternoon and get them out. Do you know, the brain is like a muscle. The more you challenge it, the stronger it gets. So learning a musical instrument, learning a new language, memorizing Bible. That is powerful. Some people think I have a gift. I don't. It's just hard work. And it takes me about 21 days to get 1 verse in my brain. You might be quicker. But I just keep at it and at it. And if I read something that I think is very appropriate, like the mind and the nerves gain tone and strength through the exercise of the will. The power of the will, in many cases, is a potent soother of disease. I just memorized that out of a book because I thought I said it so well. But it takes me a long time. But once it's in there, it's in there. It's like you hear a beautiful pianist. They didn't start yesterday. Practice makes perfect, and practice makes permanent. So whenever I read something that I love, I'll memorize it. And whenever I see something I love and I want to memorize, I'll take a deep breath because this is going to take days. And I'll go over it again and again and again until eventually it is solid in my brain. Do you know, it's an exciting thing playing with your brain. Learning new things, developing new skills. And every time you learn something new, another dendrite. Do you know what science shows us? 1 nerve cell can develop 70,000 dendrites. Wow, the potential of this brain. You know, the tragedy is most people go through life never fully developing their brain, never accessing the power in that brain. Isn't that tragic? In fact, look at most people in their latter years, their brain's almost back to a child. 1,700 new cases of Alzheimer's being diagnosed every week in Australia. Brains that are just deteriorating. How tragic is that? Why are they deteriorating? Bad air, not enough sunshine. Your brain needs sunshine, it gets it through your eyes. Living on the stimulants, which compromise frontal lobe function. Not sleeping enough. There are hours that the brain recharges. That's between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. every night. In winter, 9 and 2. Exercise. you're training for something more important than the Olympic Games, and that's life. And that's the latter years of your life. You've got to go into training. You've got to do that every single morning. Proper diet, which we looked at in our last lecture and we've been looking at this week. High fibre, generous proteins, healthy fats. The brain is the fattiest organ in the body. 70% of the membrane around the brain is fat. Is this fat-free diet one of the contributing factors to the Alzheimer's we're seeing? There are fats that the brain doesn't like, and they're the altered fats. And they're the fats from the animal that are usually laden with insecticides, pesticides, antibiotics. Coconut oil is a healer for the brain. And Dr. Bruce Fife, he has written 2 excellent books showing how you can heal brains with the coconut oil. His name's Fife, Dr. Bruce Fife. One is called Stop Alzheimer's Now, and he shows how you can heal neurodegeneration in adults, not just Alzheimer's, but Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, dementia, Huntington's chorea, and his other book, Stop Autism Now, is about children's degeneration and how you can heal it with the coconut oil. And so the other oil that the brain cells love is the omega-3s. So that's found in your chia seed, your ground flax and your walnuts. I think God's got a sense of humour because the walnut looks like the brain and it's got the oils that the brain can use for that. So can you see there are physical things that strengthen the brain? But what also strengthens the brain is strengthening frontal lobe by keeping out anything that will compromise it and harm it and using it. And the most exciting thing to me about these 2 parts of the brain is that in the frontal lobe is where God communicates with man. In Isaiah 1:18, the Bible says, "Come, let us reason together." It's right there. God is not in every man. You would never say God was in Hitler, Mugabe, Stalin. No, no, no. No, he gave mankind choice. What a gamble. That would mean that some would choose not to, as for these cruel leaders that I've just quoted. Some say, look at these atrocities. Why didn't God step in? Because God is not a God of force. In Isaiah, it says, "Come, let us reason together." Dialogue. And in Revelation 3 verse 19, the Bible gives an illustration of God standing at the door and knocking. He says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door," who opens the door? We do. He said, "I will come in and sup with him and he with me." When someone knocks on your door, you have a choice, don't you? You can ignore it or you can open it. It's your door. So how do we open the door to let God in? And then he says, "And I will come in and sup with him and he with me." What does sup mean? Eat together. Isn't it nice to eat together? We dine together with friends. It's a lovely thing to do. It's a beautiful illustration of the intimacy with which God wants to know human beings. But he gives us a choice. He gives us a choice. And if some people choose not to, God cannot do anything about that. One man said to me at the program, he said, "Well, if I was the guy up top, I'd get a machine gun and mow them all down." And his wife laughed and said, "And what good would that do? Then the next crop would jump up." It's a hard problem, isn't it? And if God got a machine gun and mowed down all of what we'd call when I was little baddies, does that fix the problem? No, it's a heart problem. It's actually not a heart problem, it's a frontal lobe problem. God woos us through our intellect, reason and judgment. He woos us and he appeals to us through that, and then we make the choice. See, what we need to understand is the true force of the will. You see, that's the governing power in the nature of man. It's the power of decision or of choice. Power of choice God gave to man. You cannot change your heart. In fact, you cannot give to God its affections, but you can choose to serve him. You can give him your will. He will then work in you both to will and to do of his good pleasure. And the best decision I ever made was at the age of 25. When I read a book, it was called Your Bible Anew, and it explained God. It explained how the Bible was written. And when I finished reading that book, I got down on my knees and I gave my life to God. It was the best decision I ever made. Do you know what I gave him? My frontal lobe. And I actually give it to him every morning. I say, Father in heaven, guide my words. Give me wisdom for the day, especially when I had all those little children. I said, give me wisdom with each child. And you know, he is very faithful. But remember, he is not a God of force. He will never come in an uninvited guest, because then he's a God of force. Can you see that? And it explains a lot of the suffering on planet Earth. But you know, when you read the Bible, it takes the veil aside. And when you read the Bible, it talks about why there is suffering, where it all began, and you know what else is good? It tells you where we're going. Heaven is real. And to me, it answered all my questions. And that's very nice to know. And what I love about the health message is, I believe the ultimate aim of the health message is to strengthen frontal lobe so human beings have a clear mind and are now able to make the decision to know God. Such a personal thing. So I would like to encourage you to strengthen your frontal lobe. Use your frontal lobes to increase your dendrites and increase your brain, and pursue the knowledge of God. Let me finish with one little section in Proverbs that I memorized, because I thought it explained so well what I believe God has called me to do. It's Proverbs 22:17. Bow down thine ear and hear the words of the wise, and apply thine heart to my knowledge. For it is a pleasant thing if thou keep them within thee. They shall withal be fitted in thy lips, that thy trust might be in the Lord. Have not I made known unto thee this day? Have not I written unto thee excellent things in counsel and in knowledge, that thou might know the certainty of the words of truth? That thou might be able to give an answer to them that are sent unto thee. Beautiful words. In fact, it's a nice place to start. Proverbs. Just put the Bible, halve it, and you'll either come up with the Psalms or the Proverbs. Psalms are just before Proverbs. And that is like the best food that you can put into your mind. The great God of heaven that made us, made our bodies, made our minds, made our frontal lobes, gave us the incredible privilege of choosing to know him. And to get to know him, reread of him. So thank you for your attention these last 3 days. And I trust that you have been inspired to look after this incredible trust that God gave to us, the body and the mind. So thank you.